Hello, and welcome to the Homeschooling and Loving It podcast. I'm your host, Jamie, your friend at homeschool.com and homeschool mom of 6. Join us as we keep it real and chat about the ups and downs of this amazing adventure we call the homeschool life. So grab a cup of your warm favorite and a comfy chair, and let's get started. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Homeschool.com's Homeschooling and Loving It podcast. Today's episode is all about motivating your reluctant writer. Creativity and imagination are both qualities that we are struggling to keep in our fast-paced, technology-driven society. However, these qualities, as we all know as parents, homeschool families, they're still very vital to our next generation and vital in teaching our children, vital for motivating them to creative writing. And so we have a special guest with us today that's here to chat about this creativity and ways we can use our homeschool to encourage our reluctant writers to start actually enjoying this process. So let me introduce Joshua Davidson. He's the creator and CEO of Zookeeper. It's an inspirational children's story where kids discover and create their very own magical animals. And these amazing creatures join an interactive world, which is featured in his storybooks by the same name and even a TV show. Josh is a passionate public speaker on education, games, and the importance of nurturing creativity, which is why he's here today. So welcome, Joshua.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're thrilled to have you. And just to speak to the topic, motivating children to write creatively, it's really been a long-term struggle, even for our homeschool community. And in fact, a recent survey homeschool.com did found that creative writing is the second most troublesome subject to homeschool parents, second only to math. So sure. I know you know a lot about this, and this is kind of your expertise. So I read about you the last decade or so, you've been pioneering innovative ways to inspire kids to write. So kind of tell us a little bit about what motivated you to help kids get writing.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's one of those things that you hear creative writing, you think, surely this is a lovely topic. Kids get to explore endless worlds of their imaginations, but we forget that there's this core skill that they have to learn first that's still really hard. It's part of the education process that they need these skills. And they need to feel confident that they've acquired these skills before they can really start having fun with words. But once you've got that skill, that's where their imaginations take flight, and they really start to understand why it's so vital for life. I think we have an organization in the UK called the National Literacy Trust, and they did some research that pointed that love of writing or similar was one of the number one indicators of future happiness. And I think that makes, as someone who's dedicated their last 10 years to trying to get kids to fall in love with writing, of course, I'm 100% behind that finding. But it also makes sense. Fundamentally it does, because it's about communication, but it's also about enjoyment and, your imagination having fun and taking you to endless places and really giving you a lot to cope with the world and life when you've got a flexible mind that the combination of lots of different words in interesting orders tends to help with. By the way, I have the tendency to ramble, the tendency to talk quite long answers. So feel free to jump in. But I will pick up on what you specifically asked me now about sort of my background over the last 10 years and what I've been doing, which has been pretty much focused around Night Zookeeper, as you mentioned. So Night Zookeeper, it's a name of a book series, it's the name of the website, it's the name of the TV show. And I love to say that it's two words that tell a story. It's a night zoo. Like, this is immediately evocative. And I have to say, I came up with this before Night at the Museum or any of those pretenders came around. I had the night zoo in my imagination. Um, because at nighttime things are possible that otherwise aren't during the day, as we know with the teddy bears picnic. And that's the the essence of what Night Zookeeper tries to capture. It tries to be a story world that's going to galvanize and excite the imaginations of children. So that's where it started, really. It started with me having this idea for or this question of what magical animals could exist in a zoo at night. And I came up with my own time traveling elephant and spying giraffes that could turn invisible. And I thought, aren't I creative and clever? But then I had some conversations with some kids, and their ideas kind of blew my idea out of the water. And I realized that this is something that was getting the kids really excited just by asking them the question, posing it to them. Result in incredibly engaged children. And of course, engagement is step one in learning. It's not the be all and end all, but if you don't have engagement, then you're going to really to push learning, and that's where learning through play and everything sort of stems from. This can you excite? Can you enthuse? Can you get your kids sat on the edge of their seats or standing up, running around? Even better.
Well, that's kind of the key to that motivation. I liked what you said just a minute ago about building their skills. And then in light of that, building their skills, I guess that would give them a measure of confidence. So do you feel that confidence is kind of the underlying necessity for them to be motivated and for them to write?
Kids don't, failure is one of the things in education that we've got wrong. I think this isn't necessarily a UK specific problem. I'm sure this is around the world, but we just haven't quite found a way to reframe failure as learning. And kids have felt that, I think, with writing quite hard. It's the same with maths, where you're right and wrong. And you mentioned, there's challenges with that because kids don't like getting things wrong because they see it as a failure, and reshaping that in their minds is so important. And yeah, so that's where skill building can have an impact on the confidence, and that confidence can lead to the enjoyment. And so just as a sort of a caveat to that, I think you have to be really careful about making it all about skill building. This is the sort of the tightrope that educators walk. Is they're going to need some skills, and when you I remember. So I was dyslexic as a child. I guess you always are dyslexic. But I was classified as dyslexic as a child, and so I really did struggle with sort of communicating my thoughts and getting them down on paper initially. And I had to really work at it. But there was a few sort of breakthrough moments for me. I got put in my top English class because I wrote at school, even though I was dyslexic, because I wrote a short story and I used the word undulating. And I learned the word undulating, and the undulating hills. I read it in a book that I think was on a holiday, and I had no idea what it meant, but I asked my parents, and they said it means, like an undulating hill. It goes up and down. And that stuck in my head. I'd learned what a word meant, and it was quite a long word. And I wasn't used to knowing long words. And now I had a long word in my head. And so when I got given an early lesson when I went into higher school, upper school as they would call it here in the UK, I was set with a challenge of writing a story. And I didn't know what story I was going to write, but I knew I wanted to use the word undulating. That was going to be used in it. So it was going to be set on some undulating landscapes. And that gave me the confidence to write, knowing I was going to use that word. And I suspect my story was longer and better because I was enthused to use this particularly long word that I'd learned, and I'd had that satisfaction of learning. And then I was putting it into practice. And then my teachers saw that, recognized that was, a good piece of writing. I suspect they also noticed that I would use some quite advanced vocabulary, but no, I think more or whatever they saw, they thought this kid is actually, he's quite a capable writer. So they put me in the advanced class. And I think that the lesson for me there, and what I try and bring into my writing of storybooks now for kids, is that they want to learn as long as you can frame it in a way that it feels like you're giving them the superpower of knowledge, then and then you give them an outlet where they can show off that superpower of knowledge, then you really are building a lovely cycle and changing that conversation around skills to output, and sort of meshing them together, and that's really important.
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely agree. I know one of my children, and it's actually my youngest daughter, is also dyslexic, and creative writing was almost a painful process for her. Like we could write all day about giraffes or elephants, very technical writing. But when it came to creative writing,
Right.
and pulling
Right.
something from inside of her and her imagination and putting on,
Yep.
it was there were tears involved. It was that
Yes.
bad.
Yes.
So getting the student past that point, if they struggle
Yeah.
with anxiety or just fear almost
Yes.
of opening up themselves to this, I think both of those things that you just talked about, the skill building, the
Yeah.
confidence, and then opening up to, I think it
Yeah.
all works together.
Well, the other lovely thing that you can do in this context, and I would say if there's one defining sort of characteristic of what the Night Zookeeper learning program does versus others, is we really intertwine drawing and writing. And that's, I mean, I went on, I did a fine art degree, and then I did a master's in digital art. So I've always been a very visual person, but I would always write stories about my paintings all the way up to the master's level. I would have a painting I had done, but I'd kind of be more interested in the fact that I would write this kind of Lord of the Rings style story about this painting that I'd made. And I think that this connection between visuals and writing is a lovely way of accessing those creative parts of our brain that sometimes kids are struggling, as you say, to sort of to open up. So a classic exercise you could do in the situation with your child would be to get them to do a drawing of something, maybe not from scratch, because sometimes the blank pages is still very scary. But if you gave them some specific check goals, like on Night Zookeeper, for example, we might give you a banana and a frog and say, can you create a banana frog? And you'd show them the banana and the frog, and now they're combining these two together. But then you start, as they're drawing it, you can start talking to them about the drawing that they're making. You can say, what's that? Or why have you drawn it like that? Do you think they've got any other abilities? Do you think this is an intelligent penguin? Banana frog. I can't believe I suddenly threw a penguin in there. That's mad. But you can start to sort of draw out the character that they're creating and get them to tell you. And it's sometimes, again, another way of accessing that creative part of their brain. If you're not saying, suddenly be creative and write something down, if you're saying, draw something, and you're guiding them into that creativity, then tell me about what decisions you're making as you're making those drawings. If they're still unsure, like that, well, it's just a banana and a frog, which, again, we've had kids tell me as I've enthusiastically bounded around workshops. I don't know, it's just a banana and a frog, they might say. But you can find a way in by saying, yes, but you've decided to give this frog particularly big eyes, haven't you? And they're, yeah, I have. And you just start to seed some ideas around why that frog might have particularly big eyes. Do they love reading? Can they see certain distance? And I know, to a certain extent, it feels like cheating because you're giving your child, your student, an idea. But it won't be long before they start, pinballing that idea around in their minds and start adding new ideas. So then once you've got creative discourse happening, once you've got this character that's being built, or they're telling you about this place that they've created or this object or whatever it is they're inventing, then suddenly the idea of writing about it doesn't seem so hard. In fact, they now want the skills to be able to write about it because they want to make sure that you don't get it wrong. Which is another lovely thing that we've noticed in our workshops is, if a kid, once a kid has decided, even a kid who had no imagination, according to themselves, before they went into the class, once they've actually got this idea, they know it better than they know the giraffes or the elephant sort of fact files that you were mentioning earlier. They can tell you when they first came into existence, and they can tell you what language they speak and what they eat on Wednesday afternoons after their cup of tea. Like, they know this creature inside out, and so they want to communicate that, and that's where the joy of creative writing can sometimes spark, and you can find your children demanding the ability to write, demanding your attention and your time to help guide them through the process of getting those ideas down.
Kind of in line with what we just discussed, and even my particular example, I know that when I was reading about Night Zookeeper, there were some wonderful articles in your blog that talked about how this creative writing process helps with special needs students.
Right.
I'd love for you to talk about that, talk to that, and address that for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, so my mum was she was an art teacher. Before that, she was an art therapist. And I think that this touches on the power of creativity. And I think that, for human beings, with all of our various eccentricities and uniqueness, it all comes back to the same fundamental desire to communicate, to understand ourselves, to reflect, and self-expression and self-understanding. It's all exposed through the creative process. It's self-reflection, as I say. And then there's the communication. So there's the understanding and the empathy that you have with dealing with others. So we have found that whether your child is on the autistic spectrum, whether they're dyslexic or have dysgraphia, whether or not they're highly anxious and they struggle with anxiety, fundamentally asking them the questions, letting them have these open opportunities to reflect themselves and then bring their personality and their ideas to their learning is a much better approach than the traditional school system of sit, listen, absorb. And I think it's as simple as that, really. Like, it's just about recognizing that we are all individuals. We all learn in different ways. But if you keep the questions open, if you keep the focus on what the child wants to do, and find ways to work in the learning around that self-directed learning, then you are really going to be the supportive friend as well as the teacher through that process. So I would encourage anyone listening who has a child that struggles with writing. Obviously, it doesn't have to be because they have any other issues going on. It is just a sad fact that we're in this situation where creative writing is not necessarily children's favorite subjects. But if you do have a look at our blog, as you say, we do have a lot of tips and tricks, but also just this kind of philosophy, I guess, and how you could sort of adopt this mindset when dealing with this topic with your children.
Absolutely. I think we're beginning to see how all these pieces kind of come together. Another hot topic that I hear a lot about, or I get a lot of questions about from other homeschool moms, is that idea of gamification. And obviously, if you've got a online program, I'm sure there's probably some gamification to this learning process that's built into the Night Zookeeper, or at least I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how does the gamification of this learning process and the creative writing process work together with these other things we've discussed?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to say is that gamification can be misunderstood. Essentially, what we're talking about here is learning through play and using play systems that are attractive to all humans to continue to engage. So I would say the most fundamental game within Night Zookeeper is the one that I've described. It's character creation, and that is a process that kids repeat on Night Zookeeper many times, because there's always more ideas for characters. But concurrently with that, we do have other systems. So I mean, for example, our grammar games, or our punctuation games, or our our vocab acquisition games, they essentially the characters that you create, that you invent and that come to life in your imagination and you draw. Those drawings then participate in mini games on Night Zookeeper. So you're not just playing with some generic adult decided hero in this game. The hero is the character that you're in the process of imagining and bringing to life. And I think that's, again, it's an important kind of shift, and understanding that the kid's going to be more interested in their ideas being brought to life than they are in being told what to play with. So that sort of shifted. So, and it's a game, these are mini games that take advantage of what technology can do to personalize a game, and give the right sort of vocabulary at the right time. It's games that use sound effects and music to bring to life a mini narrative and scenarios. For example, word climb, they're animals hopping up a tree and they have to go onto the branch, which has a synonym that matches the word that's on the trunk of the tree. Otherwise, the branch is going to fall. Or word hop, where they're in a volcano and they're jumping on the correct rocks that are sinking into the lava, and the word on they have to click on the word that is correctly spelt, so that's improving their spelling. So these are little mini games that use these kind of fun, evocative environments to enhance the enthusiasm and the concentration of a child for that skill building stuff that we were talking about. But yeah, there's overarching meta game in Night Zookeeper, which is building your own fantasy world, learning more about the narratives that I'm creating for them. And you mentioned at the top, the most fun for me on Night Zookeeper is that kids can co-write the stories. They can help get involved in helping create TV shows or video based around Night Zookeeper, and it's they're writing, they're drawing, they're getting involved in a creative community, and the work that they're doing isn't just sat in a cupboard or best case on the fridge. Like, this is work that other kids can see, and what might have a real impact on the world around them. Because I guess a fundamental driver for me is I've always thought that kids' ideas are worth more than really we're treating them at the moment. I want to get those ideas out there.
I agree. I really love that. Now that you've explained it thoroughly, I
told you I can do that.
At first, I wasn't quite understanding how the kids make their animal or creature, and then it stays with them, and that's what they play with. Yeah, I can really see that. I was a a classroom teacher. Now I'm a homeschool mom. I can see how they would take ownership in that, and that would make a huge difference. So yeah, that's wonderful. That's a component that I've never seen before.
Yeah, so I haven't seen it anywhere, and I think it's about attitude, and this kind of again, it's about recognizing that the kids do have skills. Their ideas are great. So why not celebrate them and make them as part of the experience?
That's wonderful. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you sharing all this with me. Before we wrap up our podcast today, do you have any final comments that you'd like to share with our homeschool community, just about creative writing and motivation and learning, and even Night Zookeeper?
Sure. Look, I mean, I think everyone is doing a great job. It is a really challenging area. I want to thank anyone in the community that's already tried Night Zookeeper with their kids. If you haven't, we would love to hear your feedback on it if you want to give it a go. I think whether you use the program or the resources or the books, the most important thing for me is that we just sort of shift the conversation around creative writing. And I guess I think I don't like the fact that it's got this reputation now as something hard, and I get it, but I wish that I think I think if we break it down, it doesn't need to be hard. I think if there is more steps in the, as we talked about, how you can break it down as a drawing or as a conversation or as, so the animal creation that I mentioned, like a kid doesn't just write on Night Zookeeper a big paragraph of text. We can also break it down in questions. So I mentioned like how a teacher can sit over the shoulder of a child and ask questions. That's what the program does as well. So it might say, does this animal have any family members? What does it like to wear on Sunday afternoons? This kind of bit by bit drawing out conversations with children, and then ultimately those conversations can lead to full 10 chapter stories that are better than mine, and we've seen it happen time and time again on Night Zookeeper. So there's hope. I guess that's a message of hope.
Absolutely. And of course, as we've started back to school here in the States, the last few weeks, most of us, and I've kind of hit some brick walls. So this is encouraging to me. I really like just several of the points that you made, and I'm hoping to try them out myself with my own creative writers.
Oh, good. Great. Yes. Well, please do. And I'd love to hear any success stories as a result of this. I always love reading about any, changes in attitude. It's why we get out of bed in the morning.
Absolutely. So can you share with our listeners about your website and where to find Night Zookeeper? And then I know there was a TV show, like a cartoon animated series. Is that available, or do you have to have a subscription to a certain? Just tell us about that, if you would.
Yeah. So yeah, sure. So the website is nightzookeeper.com. If you're in the UK, then you can watch that animated show on Sky Kids or Now TV Kids package. But if you're in the US or Canada or anywhere else, then you can access it. So once you're on the .com.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Joshua. It was great.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been wonderful. I'm sorry for all of the rambling. I get a bit passionate. I think I even hit my microphone a couple of times, so apologies for those booms.
You're absolutely fine. Thank you.